About 3 years ago, my grandpa told me that according to the popular personality model in psychology, there are 4 types of people. He said that there are thinkers, emoters, people who are emotional, doers, and dreamers. He told me he thought that I was a dreamer. I didn't like the model because I didn't understand what does it mean to be a dreamer. I want to emphasize that this is a relative dominant model, so if you are a thinker, then you do have emotions, you do things, you do dream, but you're predominantly a thinker. If you're a doer, then you have emotions, you dream, you think, but you're predominantly a doer. But I didn't understand still, what does it mean to be a dreamer? It didn't seem to fit. The dreaming didn't seem to belong. So I thought there should be 3 types of people. But then I thought about it more. And I thought, wait, people see thinking and emotion as completely opposite one another. But really, they're pretty much the same thing. Our thoughts affect our emotions affect our thoughts. These are very intertwined. So I said, okay, we have a duality, an interconnected duality between thinking and emotion. And I thought, okay, doing really isn't so separate from thinking and emotion either. When we have thoughts, we do things in accordance with our thoughts. We have emotions. Our emotions cause us to do things. They motivate us to do things. So I thought, wait, doing isn't so separate from these either. And actually, even sometimes we do things and then we think about it later. There's brain scans that show this, that sometimes people do something and then the part of their brain that's thinking about doing it lights up afterwards. So I thought, okay, these are all interconnected. We have a triad. One other thing I want to say, though, too, is that thinking and emotion, the thoughts is supposed to be associated with the cortex, and the emotions are supposed to be associated with the limbic system. Well, these are actually very interconnected. So neurobiology would say the same thing. Thoughts and emotions aren't so separate as we think. Then I thought about dreaming. I thought, how does dreaming fit in with all of these? And I remembered what a psychology professor had talked about. She was saying that when we dream, we have thoughts, we have emotions, and we do things. But also when we dream, our bodies are paralyzed. Our spines are paralyzed. The reason our spines are paralyzed is so that we don't act out our dreams. Because in our dreams, we're doing a lot of things. We're running around, we're running from monsters, we're hiding, people are having sex. People are doing a lot of things in their dreams. But so we don't act these out in our beds or wherever we're sleeping, our bodies are paralyzed. So yes, when we dream, we have thoughts, we have emotions, we do things, but at the same time, we're disconnected from our physical. So I thought, dreaming is separate from these other 3. It kind of transcends these other 3, but it also encompasses them. Another thing I want to say is that we have thoughts in our dreams, but they're different than our thoughts regularly. So for instance, in our dreams, a part of our frontal cortex, or part of our brain, is disconnected. So when we're dreaming, this part is associated with planning, and recognizing what seems normal and what doesn't seem normal. So when we're dreaming, there might be monsters, there might be crazy things that in normal life we would say, hey, this isn't real. But we don't question it in our dreams. We just take it for granted. We're running away from a monster. Also, there's a different quality to our emotions, and there's a different quality to the things that we do in our dreams. One thing I want to say too is that sometimes people describe lucid dreams, where they recognize that they're dreaming while they dream. They recognize that they're creating this reality. In a dream, you're creating the reality around you. You're not a real person. Yes, you are a body in your dreams. You have an ego. You're protecting this body, but it's not real. And sometimes people recognize this while they're dreaming, that they're actually dreaming. This isn't reality. When this happens, they can do things like fly. They can do things that you can't really do in regular life. You could walk through walls, do crazy things like that. Okay. But that's only when you recognize that you're dreaming. But sometimes even when people can do some crazy things in their dreams. Okay. So then the next day, I drew another quadrant. In the first quadrant of this quadrant, I wrote contemplation. In the second quadrant, I wrote passion. In the third quadrant, Grandma, can you show this, please? When I'm drawing these out, contemplation, passion, thank you. In the third quadrant, I wrote flowing. In the fourth quadrant, I wrote knowing. We're going to get to hopefully what knowing is later, but for now, let's talk about some definitions. So we're going to go back to this first quadrant. Okay, so what is the definition of thinking? Well, our thoughts are really shaped by our egos or shaped by our identities. So let's say I consider myself to be a black person, then my thoughts are going to be shaped by this. The way I see the world is molded by the way that I see myself, my ego. And my thoughts are related to this. I want to say that neurobiologists say that thinking actually is completely physical, that there is no non-physical aspect of thinking. What they say is that all thoughts is the firing of what are called action potentials in the neurons in our brains, and the release of neurotransmitters in our synapses. This stuff seems complicated, but hopefully later we're going to see it's not that complicated. But they say, okay, it's based on neurotransmitters, firing of these action potentials in our brain, and different parts of the brain firing at different times, and this is all our thoughts are. They say it's completely physical. Others disagree. They say that there is a different quality to our thoughts that is beyond physical. You're going to see why this is important hopefully later. Emotions are also shaped by our egos. So for instance, once again, let's say I consider myself to be black. Somebody says, Ryan, I do not like black people. Then my ego is hurt because this person just hurt my identity with the way that I see myself, my ego. So I might get angry. I might fight that person. I might cry. If the person says, okay, I'll give another example. Let's say I consider myself a basketball player. And, I'm dribbling my basketball and someone says, hey Ryan, you're a great dribbler. You're awesome. Then I'm going to be happy because my ego is connected to being a basketball player. And this person says, hey Ryan, you're a good basketball player. My identity is, I'm feeling good about myself. I'm happy. Another thing I want to say about emotions is that our emotions are used to manipulate people a lot. So, like I said, if I'm a basketball player and someone says, hey Ryan, you suck at basketball, I get angry. Why do I get angry? Because I want to manipulate him. I want to make him, maybe say, no, Ryan, I'm sorry. You're a good basketball player. So my ego feels good about itself. We use our emotions a lot to manipulate people. I think that's pretty self-evident. Okay. There's another thing I want to say about thinking too, which is pretty interesting, is that there's this show called The Secret. You could look it up on what is it called? Netflix. And it talks about how our thoughts can manipulate reality too. So our thoughts create reality. So if you're thinking happy thoughts, then good things happen for you. If you're thinking bad thoughts, and bad things happen for you. So we're seeing this kind of magical quality of thought. And there's actually some evidence, scientific evidence, that this is true. So let me explain. There's this one experiment where they have a person think happy thoughts, and the person is near a water molecule, and they record how this water molecule reacts to this person's thoughts. And actually, the water molecule is changed. You could look this up. So if the person's thinking happy thoughts, the water molecule takes beautiful crystalline structures. It's hard to explain, but it just looks nice. But if the person's thinking bad thoughts, then the water molecule is affected by that. So there is evidence that our thoughts affect reality. So once again, our thoughts are kind of like actions. What we think affect things around us. So once again, thoughts and doing, they're not so separate. Okay. Emotions too. They've done the same experiments with our emotions. So if you're thinking happy thoughts, you're happy. When they make people happy, then it affects the water molecules. There's other experiments that show this too. Okay. Now, we do things. Usually what we do is connected with our egos. Once again, if I consider myself a basketball player, what am I going to be doing? I'm going to be practicing basketball. Interestingly, what we do affects our physical bodies. So if I play basketball all the time, my body is going to be affected by it. My shoulders might get bigger, and as your body gets big, as things change in your body, then it affects what you can do. So here's one example. There's this rock climber guy. I watched him on 60 Minutes. He climbed rocks all the time. And all of a sudden his hands became like super strong. And he was able to climb rocks effortlessly. So what he does, it affects his physical body, but his physical body affects what he can do. So once again, our physical bodies affects what we can do. People say that thoughts are physical, emotions are physical. Oh, I forgot to say that emotions are also related. Scientists say are completely physical as well. They say it's just related to, once again, neurotransmitters in your brain and hormones in your body. Okay, back to doing. Let me just say this. When I would play basketball when I was younger, sometimes I would think of myself as, I would think that of myself as black. The reason why I did this, that might offend some people, but the reason why I did this is because the stereotype is that black people are better at basketball. And I felt like I played better sometimes when I would think of myself as black when I was playing basketball. So our thoughts affect how we do things. I know Charles Barkley talked about emotions affecting how he does things. So before a game, Charles Barkley would describe that he would try to get it every once in a while. He would try to get himself extremely angry. He would try to make himself angry. And he thought that this made him play better. I remember I used to do this too for a little bit when I was playing basketball in high school. When I wasn't playing so well, but I would think before the game, I would think that the other player on the team said something bad about my mom, and this would make me angry. And then I would go into the game thinking, okay, this guy said something bad about my mom. I'm going to go all out. I'm really upset. I'm going to show him. So this is what I would do. So our emotions affect what we do, our thoughts. All these are interconnected once again. Okay. Now, dreaming. Freud talks about how our ego is central to our dreams. So he talks about the Oedipal complex, that really what people want to do is they want to have sex with their mothers and kill their dads. It's an interesting idea. But so what he says is that in our dream there's a latent reality and a manifest reality. So the manifest reality would be me drilling a hole with my screwdriver into a wall. Okay? This is a manifest reality, but he says there's a latent reality behind it. He says really that dream is about you having sex with your mom. So it's an interesting idea. But what he says is basically that our dreams, that there's a subconscious aspect to our dreams. What we do actually in our dreams isn't what we're really doing subconsciously. Now, I want to say, though, that So in our dreams, remember, we're a body. We're always trying to protect our body. We're protecting our physical. We're doing things like having sex. Like I said, in our dreams, things are spontaneous because a part of your brain associated with planning is disconnected. So we're doing things we wouldn't normally do in regular life. So people describe that they kill people. They sometimes are naked. Sometimes they cover themselves up because remember, you still have an ego. You're walking around naked and then you cover yourself up. Sometimes people say that they have a test. They have a test and they completely forgot to go to the test. This is their ego, right? This hurts your ego. If you miss your test, you get an F. You're messed up. You just messed up completely. This hurts your ego. So your dreams are really connected to your ego. People say that your dreams prepare you for reality. So, for instance, you have a dream that your house is on fire. Well, people say this prepares you for the event. Let's say that your house is on fire. In case your house is on fire, now in your dream you've already practiced running out of your house. People even say that your dreams, like thoughts, emotions, and what you do, affect reality. This is an interesting idea. I've heard a lot of people describe things like this, that they say they had a dream about something, and then later, in reality, something happened that was associated with that dream, as if the dream predicted that, or even created that reality. So this is interesting stuff to contemplate. Okay. So now let's go to the definition of contemplation. So when we contemplate, we focus on something completely. We put all our energy, all our focus on it. We're contemplating it. Often we search for patterns. We search for deeper meanings. All our focus is on something. We're contemplating it. I've heard somebody say that when people contemplate, they often focus on eternal qualities like beauty, truth, things that are beyond rational resolution. It's an interesting idea. But basically, the main thing about contemplation is it's not distracted. There's no distractions. All your energy, all your focus is on it. Is on something. Okay. Then we have passion. Once again, we have a duality. People say that contemplation and passion are completely different. Contemplation is mental, passion is more, people say it's more visceral. But we're going to get to it. Once again, it's a duality. They are interconnected. So my definition of passion, and I can always hopefully expand on these definitions, is when you're a product of something larger than yourself, greater than yourself, your ego, then you're passionate. It transforms you. You go all out. You put everything into it when you're passionate because you're part of something greater than yourself. It moves you. Interestingly, the word passion comes from the word suffering. Let me just see something. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Comes from the word suffering. So I don't want to make passion seem like it's all good. It's difficult to be a part of something greater than yourself. There is suffering involved because you go all out. You put everything into it, and suffering can be attached to that. Interestingly, the word compassion means to suffer with. If you want to answer that, Grandma, I'll continue to talk. Grandma, can you?
Hello? Yeah.
So, compassion means to suffer with.
Oh, great. I'll be down this afternoon then.
So when people have empathy,
Okay, thank you.
when people are part of something larger than themselves, they see others as one with them. They don't see things as disconnected. They see the unity in things.
Can't you break it?
It's fine. I don't want to break it. I want to continue, hopefully. So then we have that if you see the unity of things, you see yourself as one with other people, then you suffer with them. You go all out, you're compassionate, but you're willing to give up. Sometimes people are willing to give up their lives for things when they're passionate. But, once again, people say contemplation and passion are different. Well, if you're passionate about something, you contemplate. You contemplate it. You put all your focus on it. You just contemplate it. If you contemplate something, then you become passionate about it. Okay, then the third quadrant I put, Grandma, do you want to hopefully show? So the third quadrant, I put flowing. Wow, I'll do it.
I wouldn't do this.
All right, thank you, Grandma. It's fine. Okay. The third quadrant, when you were showing it, Grandma, you just have to look at the screen, so you have to see what you're showing. Because, okay. For the third quadrant, I put flowing. Now, flowing is synonymous with the zone. Michael Jordan talks about the zone. When we flow, everything is perfect. Everything is pure. You're not aware of your body. You're not aware of how you look. Your ego is dissolved. And what you do, ironically, looks perfect. What you do when you're a part of something greater than yourself, larger than yourself, and you're not aware of your body, all your attention is focused on one thing. You know, you're not distracted, you flow. An interesting thing is, you know, Michael Jordan talked about the flow. He talked about how when he would flow, when he would get in the zone, he said that there was a different subjective quality to time. He said that time would slow down. Reality just seemed different. Things were pure. Things were easy.
My arm's getting sore.
You could rest your arm, but just make sure you show me.
Are you going to edit this?
Yeah, no, it's fine. So let's just,
Come over.
Grandma, please.
Okay.
Okay, so yeah, things are pure. Things are easy. Okay. There's a different quality at a time. I also want to mention, I forgot to mention that in dreaming too, there's also a different subjective quality at a time. Think about it. When you have dreams, you know, a whole night seems to be a few minutes. You know, time is different. When people contemplate, when people meditate and they're contemplating things, they say that time seems different. When people are passionate, there's a different quality to time. So yeah, time. There's a different subjective quality to time in all these. And then we have knowing. We're going to hopefully get to it later. One thing I want to mention too is that dreaming points to contemplation. So remember I said, can you see me inside of the thing, please? Okay, thank you. So when we dream, we are separated from our physical. We still have an ego, but we're also separated from our physical. We're starting to transcend our ego. Like I said, if you recognize your dream, you can do things like fly. Okay? This points to contemplation because remember I said when we contemplate, we focus on something completely. We look for patterns. We see the oneness of things. In order to do this, in order to contemplate, you have to separate yourself from your physical, from your ego. In order to truly contemplate, to see the things as they truly are. Okay. So, I'll just take it. So, the fourth quadrant, dreaming. Grandma, please can you just show it every once in a while like this? So, you see how I see what I'm looking at? That's what's being recorded. So, dreaming encompasses everything before it and also points to what comes after it. Can you do this? Can you show what I'm writing every once in a while, please, Grandma?
Not really.
Yeah.
I should give it to you and let you do it.
Okay, well then every once in a while I'll do that then, okay?
Okay.
Thank you.
I can't do this much more. My arm's giving up.
Well, you can put your arm on this. Rest your arm on this, please. Sorry, Grandma. Just okay. So now a little while later, you could put your arm on that if you want, Grandma. A little while later, I drew another quadrant. In the first quadrant of the quadrant, I wrote sensation. In this quadrant, I wrote perception. You're not able to do this, Grandma, to hold it?
Talking to me while you're doing this.
In the third quadrant, I wrote response. In the fourth quadrant, I wrote awareness. Okay, see. There you go. All right, so once again, we have a duality. The duality is between sensation and perception. People say that sensation and perception are completely different, but once again, they're very connected. When we sense something, we gain usually electrical or chemical stimuli from our environment, and this stimuli is transduced to our brain, and we have this, our brain is collecting this raw data, this information from our environment. This is what our sensations are. We have our 5 senses. We're going to get into it more hopefully later. Perception, we have the duality. When we perceive something, we interpret this data from our environment. So we get this electrical stimuli. We see something. We see these electromagnetic waves, or these electromagnetic waves hit our eyes. They hit our photoreceptors. These go into the back of our brain, occipital lobe, and then our brain interprets this stimuli. And then we have a perception, and that is our environment. Really, so our perception is an interpretation of what we sense, of the data from our environment. Really, it's not accurate. So, in reality, I'm receiving ultraviolet rays hitting my eyes. I'm receiving all these different things. I have a blind spot. Where my, I guess it's where my retina, or it's where the optical nerve is hitting my retina. And in that spot, there is no information being put. And actually, if I put my hand in that spot, I can't see my hand. But what happens is my brain takes the information from our environment and it makes it seem like I don't have this blind spot. It fools me. It fills in this spot with what it expects to be there. So what I'm getting at is our perceptions, they take from reality, but they also manipulate reality a little bit in order to help us to survive, of course. It's beneficial to have our brain fill in that spot. There's a lot of other examples of this. Also, there's just examples of a ton of illusions. What illusions show is that our perception of reality is not completely accurate. So let me show an example of this. This is called the vase face example, where if you look at this, you can see this as, it's difficult to see with this camera, but you can see this as two faces. Here's the nose, here's the mouth, here's the chin, here's the nose, here's the mouth, so I'll put the eyes right here. Or you can see this as a vase.
Hello?
So
Hello?
So basically we only see what we're looking for, and we can switch back and forth to each one. Here's an example of an illusion. You have a line here and a line here. This line apparently, even though these lines are both the same size, this line to people, to their perceptions, it seems like it's longer than this line. This is an illusion. They're actually the same size, but our minds tell us that this line is longer. Okay. So basically what I'm getting at is our perceptions, they're kind of accurate, but they also lie to us, they deceive us. And you only see what you're looking for in a lot of ways. So we're going to get to this later. As our awareness changes, our perceptions change. So if you're aware of more things, then you're going to see more things. If you're aware of less things, you're going to see less things. But we're going to get to that more later. So sensation, perception, duality, and then we have response. This is the third quadrant. So we have sensations, perceptions, stimuli from our environment gives us these perceptions, and as a result, we respond. These responses are pre-programmed. They're hardwired responses. So an example is a flash of light hits my eye, I blink. Or someone does this, goes to punch me, I blink to protect my eye. It's a response. It's automatic. I don't even know that I'm doing it. It's pre-programmed. I have no choice in the manner. I have to do it. I just have to do it. So there's also there's a lot of things that are kind of pre-programmed in us. One example is people say that language, the way that we talk, is programmed into us before we're born. That's what Noam Chomsky talks about. Now, there's other examples of this, so let me give an example of like the gerbil. Gerbil, I think it's a gerbil. If you touch its butt, if it's a female gerbil or if it's a male gerbil with a female brain, it will arch its back. It's called lordosis. And that means that it's ready to be it's making itself open to be penetrated sexually by the penis. So this is an automatic response. It has a perception of the touch on its butt. It goes into its automatic response. It has no choice in the matter. It has to do it. Then we have awareness. Now, once again, awareness seems like it's the same thing as all these. So what are we aware of? We're only aware of what we sense, what we perceive, and what we respond to. This is what our awareness is. But at the same time, it's different. Our awareness is a conscious perception, kind of. So let me give an example of awareness. So they call this the
Hello?
they call this the
Who is this?
ballroom party effect, I think.
Who are you and what do you want?
Who's that, Grandma?
I don't know. These damn phone calls are
Okay.
coming. We can take a break, okay? We gotta take a break.
Well, let me finish this and then hopefully can you come back?
Yeah, I've got a couple errands I have to run. This lady wants her money.
Okay.
I've got to do things.
Okay, well that's fine, and you can do that, and then hopefully we can finish more later. Okay. So
Can you do? You can't.
I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna continue on. So please.
Okay.
Okay. So we have the ballroom party effect. I forget how it goes exactly, but if somebody says, I'm in a party, and somebody says the name Ryan, I'm receiving a ton of perceptions of sounds everywhere, but for some reason, and I'm not listening to any of them. I'm not aware of any of these sounds. I'm only aware of the conversation I'm in. But if someone says the name Ryan, then all of a sudden I'm aware of it. I perceive it. I'm aware of it. We're aware of things we don't realize we're aware of. I gave this example before where there's a firefighter. He's in he's fighting a fire. He's in a house, and then next thing he knows, he has this instinct. Something's telling him he has to run out of the house. He runs out, and then the next thing he knows, there's a backdraft. Fire shoots out of the house, and it almost kills him, but he makes it just on time. Now, he didn't realize that he didn't realize why it was that he had to run out, what told him to run out, what his instinct was derived from. It turns out scientists think that what happened was he fought so many fires before that he recognized something was different about this one. Maybe the air, the current inside of the place that he was in was different. Maybe there was, the heat was different than the normal times, and something told him something's different. I have to run out. So his awareness So yeah, so he ran out. He actually wasn't really aware of what it was completely. Kind of a subconscious awareness. We also have memories, other things that we're aware of that are different from our sensations, our perceptions, and our responses. So awareness encompasses these, doesn't exist without them, but it also is separate from them. I want to get to the fact too that there's such thing as self-awareness. A lot of animals have perceptions. They have sensation, perceptions, and responses, but they don't have self-awareness. They don't realize that they're a separate self. The way that they test this is scientists put a dot on their heads while they look into a mirror. Some chimpanzees will try to take the dot off of their heads because they're aware that they have a self. Scientists also think that dolphins have self-awareness. They do other tests to indicate that. But not all creatures that have sensations, perceptions, and responses have self-awareness. Now, a little while later, I drew another quadrant. In the first part, I wrote belief. The second part, I wrote faith. Grandma! Can you just listen? Can you just listen to what I have to say so you understand?
What you're saying, you mean?
Yeah, into the phone, please. Can you just listen? You don't have to hold the phone. I'll hold the phone, but can you just listen, please?
Right now, I've got other things I have to do right now, okay?
Grandma, you promised that you would finish up the taping.
But I've got too many things to go on. We'll do the taping, don't worry.
But you're going to miss the important stuff. All right, whatever. You're missing the important stuff.
I thought that you could edit, that you could stop and start. Can't you stop and start again?
I don't want to stop and start.
Well, we have to. We can't just do this continuously.
Okay, whatever. Okay. So we have belief, faith, behavior, and belonging. This is annoying. Whatever. All right. So, belief and faith, we have a duality. Once again, people say belief and faith are completely different things. But they're not. What we believe in, we tend to have faith in. What we have faith in, we tend to believe in. According to the Webster's Dictionary, according to dictionary definition, a belief is something that you trust is true, more based off of empirical evidence. Empirical evidence is evidence from your sensations and perceptions. This is important because remember I talked about how dreaming points to what comes after contemplation. Well, awareness, self-awareness, which is based off of our, awareness is based off our sensations and perceptions. It points to belief, what comes after it. We often believe our sensations and perceptions. Like I said, you can't believe them because they often trick you. They're stereotypical. They're simplistic. They take a simplistic picture of reality and they tell you that this is true, but they're not exactly true. So, awareness points to belief. Also, interestingly, awareness, the word awareness its etymology derives from the word wary, which means cautious. When you have a self, you're cautious, you want to protect it. That's why you have these automatic instinctual responses to things, to protect yourself, to preserve it. So, one way to make yourself more comfortable, to make life easier, is to start to believe things. So, when we're aware of things, it has the connotation that we're not so sure of it, we're aware of it, we can't quite put our finger on it, we can't quite say exactly what it is, but we're aware of something. Same thing with sensation. We sense something, we're not quite sure what it is, but we sense it. Same thing with perception. I perceive this to be true, but I'm not quite sure. I'm a little more sure than when I sense it, but I'm not so sure. Yeah, so basically what I'm trying to get at is, with all these, there's uncertainty. Well, to make yourself more certain, you start to believe. Makes things easier for you. So, okay. So self-awareness encompasses everything before it, and it points to what comes after it, belief. Faith, according to the definition, is something you trust to be so because you have a desire for it to be so. You want it to be so. I used to think that was a good definition of faith, but I think that, interestingly, people tend to have faith in things that are true. In a lot of ways, I'm going to get to that more later. But when I look at the world religions, I see that people aren't just believing random stuff, although it seems to be so. They're not just believing random stuff because they desire it to be true. There's actually a lot of truth in these religions. So, okay. So then we have behavior. When we have beliefs and faiths, we have behaviors that are in accordance with our beliefs and our faiths. Interestingly, too, I want to mention that we tend to believe and have faith in things that authority figures say are true. So if an authority says something is true, then we tend to have more belief and faith in it. So for instance, a doctor says, this medicine is going to work. The person takes it, he gets cured. Well, there's this effect in psychology called the placebo effect. The person believed that the doctor's medicine would help him. He had faith in the doctor because he's an authority figure. As a result, it actually worked. It actually cured him. Even though the medicine a lot of times is a placebo. Sometimes it's just a water tablet or a sugar tablet. It should have no effect on the person. But the person's belief that it will have an effect on him, his faith, causes him to be cured, to be healed. I forgot to mention that sensation, perception, response, and awareness, it's all very mental. We talked about how we get the stimuli and it's interpreted by our brains, and our brains tell us what to do, and our awareness is our consciousness. It's completely mental, conscious perceptions. Well, the second quadrant, is it's kind of like in your gut. It's homeostasis. Like I said, belief, it makes you comfortable. Faith, it makes you comfortable. Behavior, people have these behaviors that keep them comfortable, that keep them safe. It has a homeostatic effect. I want to say too that belief derives from the word belief, and belief derives from the word love. So be love has the same, the etymology of belief is be love. Okay, then we have, so another thing I want to say though too is, remember, authority figures tell people what to believe and have faith in. Well, also what other people believe and have faith in, people tend to believe and have faith in and behave. So if a lot of people are behaving in a certain way, other people behave in that way. So an example is people walk into an elevator and everyone's facing the opposite direction, and that person is going to face the opposite direction. He's going to behave like they all are behaving in order to fit in order to not shake things up. All right. Another example is scientists will have a group of people in a room, and there's different sized lines that they're showing them, and they'll have confederates. Confederates are people who are in on the experiment and a person who doesn't realize that this is an experiment. And the confederates will say that all these lines are the same. And then they ask the person who doesn't realize this is an experiment, are all the lines the same? And the person often will say, yes, all the lines are the same. Sometimes he actually believes all the lines are the same because he doesn't trust his perceptions. He thinks there must be something wrong with me because everybody else believes that this is true. Other times he just says it so he will belong, so he doesn't shake things up. He doesn't want to stick out. He doesn't want to make people upset, so he just goes along with what everyone else is saying. So what we're going to get at is belonging. So once again, belonging encompasses all of these. So if we have the correct belief, faith, behavior, then we belong. Psychologists talk about there's this fundamental, essential desire that we all have to belong. It's elementary to our beings to belong. Everybody wants to belong. I want to say this too, that our desire to belong shapes our beliefs, faith, and behavior. So, let me give an example. I went to a black church, African American church. It's called a black church, and the people in the church believed that Jesus was black. Their beliefs are shaped by their desire to belong, to feel good about themselves. I go to a white church, and the white people think that Jesus is white. You go to a Jewish synagogue, and they say that Jesus was a false prophet. Not a prophet either. He's just making stuff up. Then you go to a Christian place, and they say, no, the Jews are wrong. We are the true Jewish people. We are the new Israelites. The churches. One thing I want to say about belonging is it's very tied to genetics. All right, so I have to give a little story about genetics. So according to scientists, what happened was a long time ago, there was one group that left Africa, and they spread throughout the world. One group of people. Now, everybody who lives outside of Africa, whether Asian, white, Native American, everybody who is outside of Africa, or Australian, everybody outside of Africa, trace their ancestry to one woman that scientists say, they call her the mitochondrial Eve, and they say that that woman was a part of that group that left Africa a long time ago. So what this demonstrates is this. They find that everybody outside Africa can trace their lineage, trace their genes back to one woman. So they all, Asian, whites, Native Americans all share this ancestry. But if in Africa, there's a lot more families that were around. Only one family left Africa. So within Africa, there is more genetic diversity within Africa than throughout the whole rest of the world. Now, this to me, I think, explains a lot of racism. If you look at imperialism, colonialism, all this, Africans were always treated really bad, and people always looked at Africans as subhuman. They would describe them, as inferior. They didn't like them. They just didn't like them. And I think that the reason why this is a part of it is because it's based on genes. They don't share maybe as many genes with Africans. So they dehumanize them. And this allows them to do what they have done. In colonial times, they really treated Africans brutally. They used them as slaves and stuff, yeah. But slaves have been used with every culture. But Then they left Africa, and still within Africa you see a lot of people are struggling. And I know for a fact, living in the world, that a lot of people are racist against African or against black people, whether Asian, white, or Mexican, Native American, whatever. I used to think that, I do agree with what sociologists say. They say race is a social construction, not entirely based on biology, created by the group in power in order to entrench power into itself. That's true, but I do think that it's a mistake to separate genetics and evolutionary psychology from racism. So I look at the colonial stuff, and when people would go to Australia, they would look at the Australians, and remember I told you that the Aborigines, Australians, they share it as a common ancestor, and they wouldn't talk. They would talk about the Aborigines people or Aboriginal people as they would say, they're good people. We like these people, and they share features with them more. They even said the same thing about Native Americans. With the Native American, they would say, yeah, they're a noble race. They would say things like this. Of course, they would say they're inferior to us because still there is genetic differences between Europeans and them, and between Asians, and there is genetic differences, not as much though as between them and Africans, because like I said, there's more genetic diversity within Africa than if you go outside of Africa and look at the whole world. A white person and an Asian person share a common ancestor. There's less genetic diversity sometimes between, or more often, between a white person and an Asian person, or a Native American person, than between a white person and a black person. Now, people would say, yeah, like I said, they would go to the Native Americans, they would say, yeah, they're a noble race, we like them, they're inferior to us, but then when they would go to Africa, you would always see intense racism toward the Africans. And I think a part of it has to do with genetics. So what I'm getting at is genetics is important in belonging. So here's another example. Jewish people say that that they are the chosen people. This is their belief. And they have faith in this, and they, I think it has to do a lot with genetics. If you look at the genes of Jewish people throughout the world, they do share a lot of genes. They do have a common origin. But this is an interesting thing. So this is with me too. So if you're not a Jewish person, then I've experienced it a lot. I have a lot of firsthand experience with it. You're not treated so well. So I'll tell you this: my grandpa is Jewish. His last name is Cohen. He's an Ashkenazi Jew. My grandma, on her mom's side, is Sephardic Jewish. And so this makes me, according to the Talmud, Jewish. But I would not tell people a lot that I was Jewish, because growing up, I like to study Christianity, and my grandpa would tell me, that he didn't like the whole Jewish religion because he thought it was too belonging oriented, racist. Now, I've experienced this firsthand. So, for instance, I went to Israel recently, and I'm hanging out with a little girl. That sounds funny. I was staying at a person's house, and for Shabbat, and this little, I'm playing around with this little girl, and she's showing me her songs like that she's taught in her school, and she's like, yeah, she's singing her songs, and one of her songs she just starts singing. She's like, push the goy away, no goy here. I forget how it went, but I thought that was really funny because they're inculcating within this girl at this young age this sense of superiority. This sense that the Gentiles are, because what a goy means is a Gentile. Or at least that's what she thinks it means. It actually has a different meaning, but that's what they think it means. But she's seeing that as, seeing them as inferior, push them away, we don't want you around. She's singing this in her song. This is being inculcated within her. We're seeing this, and I think that a part of it has to do with genetics. Most Jews do share common genes, and there's a desire to preserve your genes and keep them going on. And one way you do that is you stick together, and dehumanize other groups. And your beliefs, your faith, your behaviors are shaped by this desire to belong. And your belonging is shaped a lot by your genes, I want to say. Let me see what else. Oh, so here's another example. When I first I started going to synagogue type of thing. Not really synagogue, but like Shabbat dinners at my school about 2 years ago. And I just met this rabbi, and he's suspicious of me because I just start coming to this. So I could tell he's suspicious. I'm good at judging people, and so I'm sitting with them, and we're talking about, I signed up for this thing where we read Kabbalah type of stuff, and then I had told at a dinner. He had called me out, and he made me tell my life story. But like I said, he was suspicious of me. He wanted me to tell my life story. And he tried to make it seem like, he does this to, I was in a random seat, and he does this all the time. He was faking it. But he tries to tell me made me say my life story. So I'm saying like, okay, I grew up, blah blah blah. I never really, I went to Hebrew preschool. But after that, I never really did anything related to Judaism. And I studied a lot of Christianity. I studied Hinduism. I studied all types of stuff, but I never really, considered myself any religion. I wouldn't tell people that I was any religion. So I'm sitting with the rabbi later after this, and he asked me a question, like he says, so Ryan, you played basketball when you were young? I was like, yeah. He says, what's wrong? You're too short to make it, or something like that. And I was like, he's this pretty short guy, so I said, I was just like, no, not really. I was like, it doesn't matter how short you are. It matters that's you see a lot of short people doing good. I mean, yes, like I said, what you can do is related to your physical in a lot of ways, but there's a lot of people who can flow, who are good, who are small. So I was like, no, that's not true. But then he's typing in his phone. Ever since I met this guy, he's treating me like this because he's suspicious that I'm not really Jewish. He gets up and then he leaves. Well, no, he says, hold on. I have to make a call. So he leaves. He makes me sit there. I'm sitting in front of a lot of people. We're in a big room. Makes me sit there for about 23 minutes. It was a 30-minute meeting. He comes like the last minute, literally. Not only that, he made me wait to talk to him in the first place. So then he comes back, and I'm feeling really sad because why? Because I'm not belonging. I'm feeling upset. I feel like I want to cry. So then he sits down, and I told him, Rabbi, if you want, what's the deal? I said, if you're worried about, like, what are you worried about? Are you worried about the fact that I study Christianity? I said, don't worry about that. I don't consider myself any religion. He was like, okay. He says, well, I wanted to ask you about that. He says, so your mom is Jewish, right? So what I'm getting at is, I could believe everything Jewish people believe. I can have the same faith as them. I can have the same behavior. But if I don't share the same genes, if I don't fit in their group, I don't belong. So belonging is different than these. But it also encompasses all of them, right? So I say, I said, wait, what did he say? Oh, he said, so your mom's Jewish? I was like, yes, my mom's Jewish. He says, so you said your mom's mom is Jewish. I said, yeah, my mom's mom is Jewish. He was like, okay. But even after that, he still has treated me funny. So then I tell him, well, he sent me a message, do you want to do blah, 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 I don't know. He still treated me funny. So I told him, because my grandma was coming that weekend, I told him, hey, have my grandma come to the Shabbat dinner with you. After that, he was like, oh no, that's fine. After that, he started treating me better. If you don't have the right genes, if you don't fit in, you could have the right behavior, belief, faith, and everything, you still won't belong. So belonging encompasses all of these, is different. We saw this in history with the Jews too. Jews would convert to Christianity sometimes in history in order to belong, in order to be able to fit into the culture that they were in. Like Disraeli did this, other Jews did this. But a lot of times they still didn't belong. The Christians didn't, they didn't trust them. Same thing when the colonialists were going to, like, Native America, they went to see, are these people savages? Can we convert them to Christianity? Are they even worth it? Can they belong with us? Like I said, I think it's, they ended up saying, oh, these people are kind of noble people. They didn't like them so much, but they were okay with them. So they said, okay, we'll convert them to Christianity. They can belong with us. So, belief, faith, behavior, belonging. I want to get at, remember, the fourth quadrant always encompasses everything before it, but it also points to what comes after it. So once you belong, then you realize that it's not good enough, you're not content, you long to be. So we see a dual connotation within all these. Awareness, there's also beware. You beware, you're cautious. Awareness, self-awareness, you're cautious, you beware. It leads to social awareness. So this is instinctual. The first quadrant is instinctual, intuitive. Consciousness, these are the four levels of consciousness. Wilbur talked about these. Then we have social, mythical, magical consciousness. Now we're in a group, we believe, we have faith, behavior, belonging. Now we long to be. Sometimes we don't belong, and we decide to then think. So then we have thinking, emotion, doing, and dreaming. So belonging encompasses all these, and it points to what comes after thinking, emotion, doing, dreaming. Dreaming encompasses all of these. Remember, you're separated from your body, your physical, your ego. Then it points to contemplation. Then you contemplate, you have passion, you flow, and you know. One other thing, though, I want to say about genetics with the Jewish people is, like I said, my grandma is Sephardic Jewish on her mom's side. So geneticists have studied the DNA of Jews, and what they discovered is that Sephardic Jewish people, they can trace their ancestry on their mother's side to the Middle East. They think that perhaps there is truth to the fact that Sephardic Jewish people, their lineage goes back to the Middle East, that there could be a relationship to them and the original Israelites. This concludes Yemenite Jews, just Sephardic Jews. Ashkenazi Jews, my grandpa is an Ashkenazi Jew. they have studied their DNA, scientists have studied their DNA, and what they've discovered is that, yes, even Ashkenazi Jews can trace their lineage, their heritage, back to the Middle East, but that's only on their father's sides. Because what they say probably what happened is Jews went to Europe, and the male Jews, the merchants, they went to Europe and they married local women. And this, and you can look this up. This is from studies at Harvard, studies at, this is legit stuff, Yale, all these places. So what they think is that probably what happened is the male merchant Jewish men went to Europe. They married local women, and then that's how. And then their children were considered Jewish, or at least they considered themselves Jewish, and they continued to pass on. The Jewish tradition continued through the father within the Ashkenazi Jewish people. These are the European Jews. So yes, they can trace their lineage back to the Middle East, but it's only on their father's side. Well, according to the Talmud is the Jewish book of law, the one that they consider to be very important. They say that in order to be Jewish, your mother has to be Jewish. So that would make me Jewish. But the rabbi, who was suspicious of me and didn't treat me very well, actually, he's not technically Jewish, genetically. Because his Jewish DNA comes from his father's side. It doesn't come from his mother's side. And they've studied this with all the Ashkenazi Jews, and this is true. I actually started studying this after he treated me like that. And, like I said, that's just the way it is. Now, what was I going to say too? Oh, and another thing is, my grandpa's last name is Cohen. Cohenim are supposed to be descendants of Aaron. They've actually found that 70% of Cohenim can trace their descendants back to Aaron. Aaron was Moses' brother. The interesting thing is, the Levites, though, I just want to put this out there. The Levites were also kind of, they had duties with the, kind of like the Kohanim, who were the descendants of Aaron, but they had duties like them. They were kind of like second-class priests. The Kohanim were the first-class priests. But it turns out that within Ashkenazi people, a lot of people who are Levites have ancestry from the Khazars. Because the idea is that the Khazars were, the nobles of the Khazars wanted to convert to, some of them wanted to convert to Judaism. So they thought, well, let's convert as Levites. We'll be, a high class. So actually the Khazar hypothesis is incorrect. People say that all Jews are Khazars. No, actually the Jews can trace their lineage back to the Middle East through their father's side. But it is true that Levites, a lot of Levites, have Khazar DNA. Now, so we talked. Okay, so then this is rational interpersonal consciousness, the third level, and then we have transpersonal, transrational consciousness. Contemplation, passion, flowing, and knowing. Now, what I want to say about knowing is, knowing, the study of knowing is called epistemology, study of knowledge. There's a lot of difficulty with epistemology. I'll just go over some quick stuff. One is the problem of induction. People say you can't really know things because how do we know that tomorrow things are going to be the same as today? So for instance, I can say that I know that the sun rises every day, but that's just because the sun has risen every day. So, but can I know that the sun is going to rise tomorrow? Well, the only way that I can say that is by say that, yeah, I know the sun's going to rise tomorrow, is by me saying, well, the sun has risen before every day, so it should rise tomorrow. But the question is, how do we know that just because something happened a lot of times before, it's going to happen again? This is the problem of induction. So people, I think it was Hume, said that knowledge is difficult because of this. There's also the problem of deduction. This is basically what they say with this. I'm not an expert with all this stuff, but they say that you can't really know things based off of logic, because they say that maybe the rules of logic are not true. That's essentially what that problem of deduction is. Some people came up with the idea that, okay, what knowledge is it's a true belief. So we have belief and knowledge, but knowledge is a true belief. It's not just a belief, it's a true belief. And it's not just a true belief, but it's a true belief with justification. So the example is that they use is, I flip a coin and it lands on its heads, and I said heads. I believed that it would land on its heads. It landed on its heads. That was a true belief, but it didn't have justification. I couldn't say why it was going to land on its heads. I didn't have good justification for it. So it wasn't actually knowledge. But if it was a trick coin and it always lands on its heads, and I said, well, the reason I know that it was going to land on, knew it was going to land on its heads was because it was a trick coin, then I say, I have knowledge. I had knowledge of it because I had a true belief, and I knew it was going to land on its head because it was a trick coin. So this is actually true knowledge. Now, so the definition of knowledge, they said, is philosopher said, is a justified true belief. But then some other philosophers came around and they said, actually, no, this is false. He came up with this idea using the matrix. He said, okay, there's a barn, and it has all the definitions that a barn should have. It's red, it carries animals, it fits every description of a barn. And I say it's a barn, so I have knowledge that it's a barn. But he said, actually, it's not a barn. He said, we're living in a matrix, and it's a projection of a barn. This isn't really a barn. It's a projection of a barn, or it could be like a dream. It's like a dream world, and this is a dream projection of a barn. It's not really a barn. So he was saying, because we don't know that we're, for all we know, we could be living in a matrix, we can't really have any true knowledge. Because really, that barn is just numbers, and it's just an illusion of a barn. Now, what I'm going to propose based on this model, and you're going to see how this is going to work, hopefully, is that we can have true knowledge. We can have knowledge. We can know. This is what I'm going to get at. Plato said that our world is just a reflection, a shadow of an eternal world, an eternal reality. That there is a true reality. Our world is just an embodiment of it. St. Paul said that our world is just a manifestation of Christ. He said that our world is just the shadow of heaven. That there is an eternal reality, and our world is just a reflection of it. I think I know the form through which all things manifest. And that form is the quadrant, or the cross. So, hopefully I'm going to explain this coming up soon. So we have knowing. I want to say that according to the Bible, let's just look at how people know, or whenever we see the word knowing in the Bible. Give a few examples, a few quick examples. Okay, let's look at the first example of knowing in the Bible. It's the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Adam and Eve disobey God's commandment, or God's command, and they bite out of the tree of knowledge. God says after this, now you will surely die. So we see a relationship between knowledge and death, and knowledge and disobedience. Remember, here's obedience: belief, faith, behavior, belonging. I want to say too that behavior is patterned doing, something you do over and over again usually, and it's usually in accordance to your belief, faith, and also to what authority tells you to do. And authority usually comes from the knowledge of the time, but we're going to get to that more later. So, but I was getting at, so they bit out of the apple, they disobeyed, so then they knew. So, knowledge. So we see a relationship between knowledge and disobedience, and knowledge and death. Interestingly, right after that too, God's upset and he says, "No, now that they've been out of the tree of knowledge, they can one day become like us." So we see a connection between knowledge and a connection with God. Interestingly, I think it was Aquinas said that when we contemplate, this is what brings us in a connection with God. Yeah, I think it was him, or it was another one of those guys that people like a lot, one of those medieval philosophers. So that's the first example where we see knowledge in the Bible. Throughout the whole Bible, death is always equated with not obeying, being rebellious. So that the Israelites were always being rebellious. They were always not obeying. And they were always being killed. God would always punish them and he would kill them. So for instance, one time the Israelites were not obeying Moses and what God was telling through Moses, and even Moses wouldn't obey. And then but what Moses said was, okay, fine. If you're not going to obey, you guys are going to know that God is with me. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up the ground. It's not going to be a natural thing. The ground is going to open, and you guys are going to be swallowed up. And then you're going to know that I'm with God. And the Israelites were like, whatever. We don't believe you, whatever. We're not going to obey. Then Moses says, okay. And then they're swallowed up. So then they know, you'd think that they would know that God is with them. But then even after that, they continue to be disobedient. And then Moses says, okay, I'm going to... they continue to be disobedient. And, God said that they had to wander around the desert for another 40 years. But then they're like, no, we'll go to the promised land now. The reason why they were... fighting with Moses in the first place was because they wanted to go back to Egypt, and they're disobeying the commands, and they're like, fine, we will go into the promised land, like God wants us to do. But then, so they're disobeying once again. God had said, now, okay, you have to go back to the desert for 40 years, but they're saying, okay, fine, we'll fight. But then they fight and they get beat back down. But so basically, what I'm getting at though is we see an equation of death and disobedience. Whenever there's disobedience, there's death. But we've made an equation between knowledge and death. Knowledge, death, and disobedience. These are all related to each other. There's a story of a man who is his dad was Egyptian, his mother was an Israelite. And his mother... Well, anyways, he ends up blaspheming, quote unquote, the name of God. And then the Israelites, he disobeyed. He disobeyed an important commandment. Now he must die. Disobedience and death. So he's thrown out of the community and he has to be stoned. I've heard some people say that this was a foreshadowing of Jesus. Or they say that Jesus also, the Israelites said that his dad was a Roman. And that his mom was an Israelite. And that he was illegitimate. And they ended up killing him for blaspheming the name of God. So I've heard people say that this is foreshadowing. But we see, what I'm getting at is we see an equation of disobedience. Now he must be killed. And we've already made the relationship between death and knowledge. Eating of the apple and death. So death and knowledge are equivalent. I want to say too that there's a relationship between sex and knowledge. So I've heard a rabbi talking about saying that eating from the fruit of the tree of knowledge was metaphorical of having sex. He says that the fruit was probably grapes, and it was that's wine, and that the snake is a phallic symbol, and probably what happened was metaphorically Adam and Eve had sex. Now there's precedence also later in the Tanakh. One of Jacob's sons has sex with one of his wives. Wasn't his mom, but it was one of Jacob's wives. One of Jacob's sons has sex with one of his wives because Jacob had more than one wife. And what it says is that the son brought the mother a mandrake, a fruit. And then it says, then he knew her. And knowing is supposed to be sex. And then it says that Jacob is upset because he had disgraced one of his wives. He had sex with her. We also see other instances of this. When Lot was being held, was living with these people, some people in the community wanted to have sex with Lot. And they said that they wanted to know him. Instead of saying they want to have sex with him, they say that they want to know him. But then the people who were saying says, no, don't have sex with Lot. Have sex with, know my daughter instead. So he lets his daughter out, and then they, rape the daughter, and then she dies. So they knew the daughter. They had sex with the daughter. So we're seeing an equation between sex, knowledge, death, and obedience. Or disobedience. We see the equation between disobedience and death all the time. So for instance, if you disobey the Sabbath, you must be put to death, and the death is on your own head. If you have sexual relationships that are not proper, you must be put, it says this in Leviticus, it says throughout, you must be put to death. Or they'll say, you're cut off from the community. Being cut off from the community is equivalent with death. You can't live outside of the community. You're in the wilderness. If you're outside the community, you're dead. Here's another example of this. If somebody gets sick and has leprosy, they are considered dead by the community. They're cut off. But if the person's leprosy leaves him, if he becomes cured of his leprosy, then he must go back to the priest. What the priest will do is he will get two doves. He will break the neck of one of the doves and, get its blood, and then sprinkle the blood on the other dove, and then let the other dove free. This is a metaphor of death and resurrection. So there's the death of the one dove, and then the sprinkling of the blood on the other dove, and then releasing of that dove. That dove is free. So the death and the resurrection. What it's saying is that person was dead to the community. He had leprosy, he was dead. But then he came back, he was cured, he came back to life. Now he's a part of the community again, he's back to life. When you're part of the community, you're alive. So we're seeing, let me reiterate one more time, disobedience and death, death and knowledge, knowledge and sex. I want to say that, this is an interesting idea, that, remember, that sex is metaphorical of death. So the French say that an orgasm is a little death. Because what happens is you have an orgasm, and then your body, all your sensation goes to that, you feel bliss, and all your sensation is going to that part of your body. And then, you're also naked, and you're having sex with the woman. The same thing with the woman. When she has an orgasm, it's called a little death. But, you know, I'm pretty sure, or at least they call the man's orgasm a little death. But then, you know, all your sensation leaves, you know, goes to that one spot. There's a feeling of bliss. And then there's the ejaculation. So there's the ejaculation and then the fertilization of the egg and then the birth of a new person. So there's kind of like your death. The ejaculation is called the little death. And then the fertilization of the egg. So then there's the rebirth. So your death brings a rebirth. People say that sex is a primitive, you know, animalistic type of thing. So you must kind of let go of your ego to have sex. You have to get naked. You have to, you know, people say it's kind of animalistic. So it's kind of like dying. And also you hear the moaning when people have sex. This is kind of metaphorical of death. So then there's the sex, this death of you. And also the oneness, you become one with the person you're having sex with. So that's metaphorical of a death of you. And then out of this comes a birth, death and a resurrection. Well, interestingly, when Jesus is on the cross, after it, the centurion says, then he knew that he was God. So we see the equation of death and we see the death and knowledge. This equation. We also see throughout the Bible. So the way I see when the Israelites leave Egypt, they cross the river. It's always important that these crossings. It's not a coincidence that they use the word cross. It's symbolic of the cross. The death of the old life. Remember, they had this home in Egypt, the safety, and then they're leaving it. The death of the old, and they're going into the new. The death and the resurrection, they die. So the splitting of the Red Sea, the crossing of the Red Sea, and after this, they knew the Lord was with them. So we see this equation. Another example is Samson. Samson is, you know, he's causing a lot of trouble for the Israelites and the Philistines, because what he's doing is he's pissing the Philistines off because he's killing all of them. And this is upsetting the Israelites because the Philistines are saying, man, the Samson guy who's an Israelite is killing all of us. He's pissing us off. Let's kill this guy and let's also kill the Israelites. So the Israelites are saying, no, we need to get rid of, we need to give Samson to the Philistines, because he's not only going to, you know, he's not only messing with them, he's also hurting us. The Philistines are going to, you know, attack us now because of this. So Samson agrees with the Israelites. Fine, I'll let you guys give me over to the Philistines. You guys just promise not to kill me. Just hand me over to the Philistines. So they end up allowing him to be handed over to the Philistines. But then he's being tied up. But then he breaks the walls. His hair grows back. We're gonna get to this more about how it relates to the form, though. But his hair grows back, and then it breaks the walls, and then he kills more Philistines when he was alive. I mean, when he died, than when he was alive. And then it says, then they knew the Lord was with them. You know, every time after these crossings or these deaths, they know that the Lord's with them. Another example is when the Israelites are fighting, and I forget the people who they are fighting. I'm going to guess it was, I'm just going to say the Gideonites, but I think that I'm using the wrong word. But they're fighting this group, and then all of a sudden, the sun stands still. Remember, we talked about how when you flow, there's a subjective experience of time which changes. Mike Jordan talks about how time seems to slow down. Well, what could have happened is, perhaps while they were fighting, they got into the zone. They started to flow. You know, one thing I want to say is people say that they flow the most when they're under a lot of pressure, under a lot of stress. When I would write raps, I like to write my raps when I was under a lot of stress, because some reason it helped me flow more. And when I would write it, I wouldn't plan out what I'm going to do next. When you flow, you're not planning out anything. Everything is spontaneous. And what I would write would be a lot better that way. Same thing if you're playing ball or anything. If you're planning out what you're going to do, you're not that good. But when you're flowing, You don't know what you're going to do next. It's a surprise even to you. Even scientists, when they contemplate things a lot and they have passion about something, Einstein said that he would contemplate something a lot, and then he said he would exhaust all his resources, and then all of a sudden, as if perhaps when he was biting out of an apple, the idea would come to him, and then he would know. So it's a surprise even to the person who's flowing. I know that Hot Sauce said his best move came, and the same thing happened with me with a move that I like to do. He was just dribbling around. He was playing all the time. He was passionate about basketball. Next thing he knew, he did this crazy move, and the dude went flying. And he didn't even know what he did. But the dude went flying, and then he tried, he kept on doing it, and he did the same thing that he did the last time, and the dude went flying. He was flowing. He didn't know what he was going to do next, and out of this came this move that he still uses to this day all the time. So this is what flowing is. You don't know what you're going to do next. But anyways, back to the Israelites fighting. The sun stood still. They got into the zone. Then they continued to fight, and then all of a sudden, rocks, kind of like with the Philistines. Remember with Samson, the rocks fell from the sky and killed all the Philistines. Well, rocks fall from the sky, kills the Gideonites, and it says that I don't know, but it says then the Israelites knew that the Lord was with them. So perhaps the sun really did stand still, if you want to think of it that way. Or you could think of it as they got into the zone, subjective experience of time, and then they just started to really dominate. Another example is, so we see the equation of this flowing and knowing. Another example is Moses is watching the Israelites fight a group of people, and then I think it was Joshua and maybe Caleb, I forget the other guy, but they start holding Moses' hands out. They hold his hands out like the cross. And every time they would do this, this is what a famous Christian philosopher talked about. This is how he saw it. Whenever he would go out into the cross, then the Israelites started to dominate. They started to win. So my idea is they got into the zone. Whenever Moses started doing that, it was representing of them dying to themselves, dying to their egos. You know, like I said, when you're under stress, you start to flow. You can't think about what you're going to do next. You know, when you're in the foxhole, you're not thinking about anything. You have to let go of your body or else you're going to be killed. So when Moses would put out his arms representing them getting into the zone, they would do well. He put his hands out like the cross. And then they knew the Lord was with them. So we see this equation of the cross in them knowing. When Elijah turns to Elisha, he crosses a little stream of water. He drops the water and he crosses it. Right then he dies. His soul goes to Elisha. And then, of course, they know the Lord is with them. You knew the Lord is with them. You always see after these events, it says something like, and then, so-and-so knew the Lord was with them after these events that relate to stuff that has to do with the cross. We're going to get to this more later. Let me see what else. Okay, and then anyways, I was going to get to the fact that, so we have knowing, and then remember we have the dual connotation, awareness and being aware, and beware, self-awareness and social awareness points to this. Then we have belonging and longing to be, it points to this. Then we have dreaming. I look at there's the I in thinking and am in dreaming. So I think, therefore I am. But you start to become, separated from your body. It points to what comes after it. And then knowing. The dual connotation of knowing is no thing. Also I want to say, when you know, you're in the now. You're in the moment. When you're in the zone, you're in the moment.